There's a moment quiet, almost sacred, when a man realizes he's standing at the crossroads between dignity and desperation. Picture him, shoulders straight, jaw set, eyes clear. Not angry, he's not broken, he's simply done. The noise around him continues the accusations, the manipulation, the desperate attempts to pull him back into chaos. But he's already gone. Not physically, not yet. But in his soul, where it matters most, he's already walking away. This is not the retreat of the defeated. This is the strategic withdrawal of the wise. There's a difference between giving up and giving in, between surrender and self-preservation. The ancient Stoics understood this distinction better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote in his Meditations that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, but sometimes the reality we're living isn't worth the suffering it demands of our spirit. Modern society has convinced us that walking away is weakness, that real men fight for everything, tolerate everything, endure everything in the name of strength. But this is the great lie of our age. True strength isn't measured by how much poison you can drink before it kills you. It's measured by the wisdom to recognize when the cup is being offered, the courage to set it down untouched. Epictetus, who knew slavery and freedom intimately, taught us that no one can hurt you without your permission. But permission isn't just about allowing someone to wound you, it's about choosing to remain in the presence of those who see your wounds as targets. There comes a time when the most powerful thing a man can do is remove himself from the equation entirely. Not because he can't handle the fight, but because he's evolved beyond the need to prove himself to those who refuse to see his worth. When a man is disrespected repeatedly, when his boundaries are treated as suggestions rather than laws of his personal sovereignty, something profound happens in the depths of his being. The first few times he might speak up, assert himself, make his position clear. He believes in communication, in working things out, in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But there's a moment you'll know it when his soul whispers a truth that his mind has been avoiding. This person doesn't respect you because they don't want to respect you. They've made a conscious choice to treat your dignity as optional. This is when the wise man stops explaining himself. He stops justifying his needs, his feelings, his right to be treated with basic human decency. Because the moment you find yourself having to convince someone to treat you well is the moment you realize they've already decided you're not worth their consideration. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that we have power over our mind, not outside events. We cannot control how others choose to treat us, but we have absolute dominion over whether we accept that treatment as the price of admission to their presence. The man who walks away from chronic disrespect isn't running from conflict, he's walking toward peace. He understands that some battles are beneath his dignity, not because he's too proud to fight them, but because winning them would require him to become someone he doesn't want to be. Victory at the cost of your character isn't victory at all. Spiritual bankruptcy dressed up in the costume of strength, when trust is shattered. When the foundation of faith upon which relationships are built crumbles beneath the weight of betrayal, the instinct is to rebuild, to forgive, to try again. There's nobility in forgiveness, beauty in second chances. But trust isn't like a broken bone that heals stronger where it was fractured. Trust, once genuinely broken, bears the scar forever. And some scars are too deep, too fundamental to the structure of the relationship, to pretend they don't exist. The Stoic understands that forgiveness doesn't require continued relationship. You can release someone from your anger without inviting them back into your life. You can wish them well without sharing your path. There's a profound maturity in recognizing that some people were only meant to teach you lessons, not share your journey. When trust dies, it often takes with it the possibility of genuine intimacy. What remains might look like relationship, might function as relationship, but it's missing the essential ingredient that transforms mere interaction into true connection. Walking away from broken trust isn't cruel, it's honest. It's acknowledging that both people deserve better than the hollow shell of what once was. It's having the courage to say that love without trust isn't love at all. It's just familiar pain wearing love's mask. When love transforms into control, when affection becomes a weapon used to manipulate behavior, When care turns into chains that bind rather than wings that lift, this is perhaps the most insidious trap a man can find himself in. Because it comes disguised as love, the controller doesn't announce their intentions. They begin with concern, with care, with what appears to be deep investment in your well-being. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the care becomes conditional, contingent. On your compliance with their vision of who you should be, love doesn't demand. Shrink yourself to fit someone else's comfort zone. Love doesn't require you to abandon your dreams, your friends, your identity to prove your devotion. Real love celebrates your expansion, encourages your growth, and supports your becoming the fullest version of yourself. When someone who claims to love you consistently makes you feel like you need to be less than you are to earn their affection, they don't love you, they love the idea of controlling you. The man who recognizes this distinction and walks away isn't giving up on love, he's honoring what love actually is. He's refusing to accept the counterfeit in place of the genuine article. Seneca taught us that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Sometimes you must end the illusion of love to make space for the reality of it, when manipulation replaces honesty in your interactions with someone, when every conversation becomes a chess game, where you're trying to figure out the hidden agenda behind their words. When you find yourself walking on eggshells in your own life, this is emotional warfare disguised as relationship. The manipulator's greatest weapon isn't their ability to hurt you directly. It's their ability to make you doubt your own perceptions, to question your own reality, to wonder if you're being too sensitive, too demanding, too difficult. But in the quiet moments when their voice isn't filling your head with confusion, you know when something feels wrong. Trust that knowing. Trust the part of you that recognizes when someone is trying to rewrite your reality to serve their purposes. The man who walks away from manipulation isn't abandoning someone who needs help. He's refusing to enable someone who has chosen deception as their primary mode of interaction. There's a profound peace that comes from choosing authenticity over accommodation. When you remove yourself from relationships built on manipulation, you remember what it feels like to breathe freely, to think clearly, to trust your own judgment. You remember who you are when you're not constantly defending your right to your own thoughts and feelings. When your peace becomes the price someone demands for their presence in your life. When drama follows them like a shadow and somehow always finds its way to your door. When chaos seems to be their natural state and they expect you to adapt to their storm rather than seeking shelter from it, this is when the wise man chooses serenity over solidarity. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of harmony. Some people are fundamentally incompatible with harmony. It's not because they're evil, not because they're malicious, but because they've never learned to exist in a state of emotional equilibrium. They create turbulence wherever they go, and they've come to mistake that turbulence for passion, for intensity, for being truly alive. But you don't have to live in their hurricane. Marcus Aurelius understood that tranquility is the blessing of the person who has learned to distinguish between what they can control and what they cannot. You cannot control another person's relationship with chaos, but you can control your proximity to it. Walking away from someone who destroys your peace isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. It's recognizing that your mental and emotional well-being are not sacrificial offerings to be placed on the altar of someone else's drama. The man who chooses peace chooses strength, because it takes tremendous strength to remove yourself from situations that feel familiar, even when that familiarity comes from trauma, from chaos, from the adrenaline of constant crisis. Peace might feel boring compared to drama. A boredom is just peace that hasn't been appreciated yet. When someone consistently tests your boundaries, it's not out of curiosity, but out of a desire to see how far they can push before you push back. When your reactions become their entertainment, when they seem to take pleasure in provoking your anger, your frustration, your pain. This is psychological sadism, dressed up as relationship. They're not trying to understand you better or work through issues. They're farming your emotional responses for their own gratification. The test isn't about whether you'll react. It's about whether you'll continue to participate. Hey, In a dynamic where your emotional responses are treated as a form of entertainment, the person who repeatedly pushes your buttons isn't trying to help you grow or challenge you to become better. They're trying to confirm their power over your emotional state. They're trying to prove that they can control your internal weather. But here's what they don't understand. The strongest response isn't the biggest reaction. The strongest response is no response at all. When you walk away from someone who treats your emotions like a toy to be played with, you're not giving them what they want. You're refusing to play a game where your peace is the prize there. Trying to win? Epictetus taught us that it's impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. The person who tests you repeatedly has already decided who you are in their mind. They're not testing to discover your true nature there. Testing to confirm their preconceived notions. You cannot teach respect to someone who has chosen disrespect as their default mode of interaction, when friendship becomes competition. When someone who should be celebrating your victories instead treats them as personal defeats. When your success becomes the source of their insecurity rather than their joy. This is when friendship dies and something much uglier takes its place. True friendship is not a zero-sum game. Your friend's success doesn't diminish your own potential for success. Your happiness doesn't reduce the amount of happiness available to them. But some people see life as a finite resource, as if there's only so much success, so much love, so much happiness to go around, and your portion somehow reduces what's available to them. They become competitors rather than companions, rivals rather than supporters. They keep score in a game you didn't know you were playing. Somehow you're always losing. The man who recognizes this dynamic and chooses to step away isn't ending a friendship, he's acknowledging that the friendship already ended. What remains is just the hollow form, the familiar patterns, the history you shared. But friendship, without genuine support, without celebration of each other's growth, without mutual encouragement, that's not friendship. That's just two people who used to be friends pretending nothing has changed when everything has, walking away from toxic. Friendship isn't abandonment, it's honesty. It's admitting that people grow in different directions. That not all connections are meant to last forever. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is release someone to find friends who are genuinely happy for their happiness rather than threatened by it. When your core values, the principles that define who you are and how you move through the world, become the subject of mockery rather than respect. When someone consistently undermines the beliefs that anchor your identity, when they treat your moral compass like a quaint relic from a simpler time, this is an attack on your very soul. They're not just disagreeing with your choices, they're dismissing the foundation upon which those choices are built. Man's values aren't suggestions, they're the architecture of his character. They're not flexible based on who's in the room or what's convenient in the moment. They're the non-negotiable elements of his identity that remain constant whether he's being watched or not, whether he's being praised or criticized for holding them. When someone consistently mocks these values, they're mocking the essence of who you are. You cannot build a meaningful relationship with someone who fundamentally disrespects what you stand for. Respect doesn't require agreement, but it does require acknowledgement that your values come from a place of sincere conviction, not ignorance or weakness. The person who mocks your integrity isn't someone who deserves access to your life. They've shown you exactly how little they think of the principles that guide your decisions. The Stoics understood that a man's character is his destiny. When you allow people who mock your character to remain close to you, you're allowing them to corrode the very foundation of your future. Walking away from someone who disrespects your values isn't narrow-mindedness, it's self-preservation. It's protecting the integrity that will serve as your compass long after they're gone from your life. When someone repeatedly takes from your life your time, your energy, your emotional resources, your opportunities without offering anything of value in return. When the relationship becomes a one-way transaction where you're always giving and they're always taking, when your generosity becomes their expectation rather than their gratitude, this is spiritual vampirism disguised as need. Everyone goes through difficult times. Everyone needs support, encouragement, and help from those who care about them. This isn't about abandoning people in their time of need. This is about recognizing the difference between someone who's going through a hard time and someone who's chosen hardship as their lifestyle, who's decided that their problems are always someone's responsibility to solve. The chronic taker has learned that there are people in this world who will give and give until they have nothing left to give. They've learned to identify these people, to cultivate relationships with them, to present themselves as constantly in crisis, so that the givers feel obligated to continue giving. But obligation isn't love. Guilt isn't connection. Fear of being seen as selfish isn't the same as genuine care. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best way to take care of the future is to take care of the present moment. But you cannot take care of the present moment if you're constantly being drained by someone who refuses to take care of themselves. Walking away from someone who only knows how to take isn't cruel, it's necessary. It's creating space for people who understand that healthy relationships involve mutual support, not one-sided sacrifice. When you find yourself constantly having to prove your worth, your love, your commitment to someone who should already know these things about you, when every day feels like an audition for a role you thought you'd already been cast in, when your value as a person becomes something that needs to be demonstrated rather than simply acknowledged. This is emotional quicksand. The harder you try to prove yourself, the deeper you sink into a dynamic that will never be satisfied with any proof you can offer. The person who requires constant proof of your worth has already decided you're not worthy. They're not looking for evidence to convince them otherwise. They're looking for reasons to maintain their position. Every hoop they ask you to jump through is designed not to demonstrate your value, but to reinforce your willingness to jump. They don't want proof of your love. They want proof of your desperation to earn their approval. But love isn't earned. It's given freely, or it's not love at all. Respect isn't something you achieve through performance. It's something you command through your presence and your character. The man who understands this stops auditioning for people who have no intention of giving him the part. He stops trying to convince people of his worth who are invested in believing he has none. Seneca taught us that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. But when you're trapped in the cycle of constantly trying to prove yourself, the imagination becomes the reality. You start to believe that your worth is conditional, that love must be earned through perfect behavior, that respect is a privilege rather than a basic human right. Walking away from someone who makes you question your fundamental value isn't giving up, it's waking up to the truth that you never should have had to prove your worth in the first place. When someone uses your past mistakes as ammunition for present arguments, when your growth is dismissed in favor of who you used to be, when every attempt at positive change is met with reminders of your former failures, this is psychological imprisonment. They've appointed themselves the warden of your past, and they have no intention of ever letting you earn your freedom. Everyone has a past. Everyone has made mistakes, poor choices, decisions they wish they could unmake. The question isn't whether these mistakes happened, it's whether they define who you are now. Growth is the fundamental right of every human being. The ability to learn, to change, to become better than you were. This is perhaps the most sacred aspect of human existence. But some people prefer you as you were rather than who you're becoming. Your past mistakes serve their present purposes. They give them leverage, control, a way to keep you in a diminished position where they feel superior. Your growth threatens their power structure. Your evolution challenges their need to feel better than you. The man who recognizes this pattern, chooses to walk away, isn't running from accountability. He's refusing to be defined by his worst moments forever. He understands that true accountability means learning from your mistakes and becoming better, not carrying them like chains for the rest of your life. He knows that the person who truly cares about his well-being will celebrate his growth, not weaponize his past against his future. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. When you remove yourself from relationships that anchor you to your worst moments instead of encouraging your best ones, you're not avoiding responsibility. You're taking the ultimate, your responsibility for who you're becoming. There's a moment that comes to every man. A moment of absolute clarity where he sees the situation exactly as it is, not as he hoped it would become, not as he remembers it once being, but as it actually exists in the present reality. This moment is both terrible and beautiful. Terrible, because it means acknowledging that something important to you is over. Beautiful, because it means you're finally free to stop pretending otherwise. This moment doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives quietly, often in the middle of an ordinary day, during a conversation that feels familiar in all the wrong ways. Suddenly, you're no longer listening to their words with hope that things might change. You're listening with the calm recognition of someone who has already made their decision. The arguing stops being about convincing them and starts being about confirming what you already know. When this moment comes, honor it. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't let fear of the unknown convince you to choose the familiar pain over unfamiliar peace. This moment of clarity is a gift from your deepest wisdom, from the part of you that has been quietly observing, patiently waiting for you to see what it has seen all along. The Stoics believe that we become what we repeatedly do, what we consistently expose ourselves to, what we choose to accept as normal. If you repeatedly accept disrespect, you become someone who expects to be disrespected. If you consistently expose yourself to chaos, you become someone who can't function without drama. If you choose to accept less than you deserve as normal, you become someone who believes they don't deserve better. But the reverse is also true. When you choose to walk away from what diminishes you, you become someone who values themselves. When you consistently expose yourself to peace, you become someone who creates harmony wherever you go. When you accept only what aligns with your worth as normal, you become someone who commands respect simply by existing. Walking away isn't about punishment. It's not about making someone pay for how they've treated you. It's not about revenge or getting even or proving a point. It's about alignment. It's about bringing your external circumstances into harmony with your internal values. It's about creating a life that reflects who you are rather than accommodating who others need you to be. The man who walks away with wisdom doesn't slam doors or make grand announcements. He doesn't need to explain his decision to people who wouldn't understand it anyway. He simply stops participating in dynamics that drain his life force. He stops showing up for people who don't appreciate his presence. He stops fighting battles that have no honor in winning them. This kind of departure requires tremendous strength because it goes against everything society teaches us about persistence, about never giving up, about fighting for what you want. But sometimes what you want isn't good for you. Sometimes persistence becomes self-harm. Sometimes never giving up means giving up on yourself. Epictetus, who understood freedom in ways most people never will, taught us that no one is free who is not master of himself. The man who cannot walk away when walking away serves his highest good is not free. He's a prisoner of his own attachments, his own fears, his own need to be needed even when that need is destroying him. Freedom isn't about having unlimited options. It's about having the wisdom to choose the right option and the courage to act on that choice, even when it's difficult. The man who walks away from what doesn't serve him is exercising the highest form of freedom. The freedom to choose his own path regardless of what others think he should do. There's a profound peace that settles into a man's soul when he stops fighting battles that aren't his to fight, when he stops trying to save people who don't want to be saved, when he stops explaining himself to people who are determined to misunderstand him. This peace isn't empty or resigned. It's full of possibility, rich with potential, alive with the energy that was previously being wasted on unworthy causes. This is the peace of a man who knows his worth and refuses to discount it for anyone's comfort. This is the peace of someone who understands that his energy is sacred, that his time is precious, that his love is a gift to be given to those who treasure it, not a consolation prize for those who take it for granted. When you walk away, let it be clean. Don't leave doors half open, hoping they might change. Don't make threats you don't intend to keep. Don't use your departure as a manipulation tactic to get them to treat you better. Walk away because you've decided that walking away is what serves your highest good, not because you're hoping it will serve theirs. The man who walks away with integrity doesn't look back to see if they're following. He doesn't check to see if they miss him, if they've realized what they've lost, if they've learned their lesson. He walks forward into his new life with his attention focused on where he's going, not on what he's left behind. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. This isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. This isn't abandonment, it's alignment with your deepest truth about what you deserve and what you're willing to accept. Seneca wrote that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. You walk away from what doesn't serve you. You're not just ending something, you're making space for something better to begin. You're creating room in your life for people who celebrate your existence rather than tolerate it. For relationships built on mutual respect rather than one-sided. Sacrifice. For love that enhances your life rather than complicates it. The path of walking away is not the path of the weak. It's the path of the wise. It requires more strength to leave than to stay, more courage to face the unknown than to endure the familiar, more faith to believe you deserve better than to settle for what you've been given. When you walk away, you're not giving up on love, you're refusing to accept its counterfeit. You're not avoiding commitment, you're refusing to commit to your own diminishment. You're not running from problems, you're walking toward solutions that honor your dignity and serve your growth. The man who has the wisdom to walk away when walking away is the right choice, and the strength to never look back when looking back would only reopen wounds that have begun to heal. This man has mastered one of life's most difficult lessons. He has learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, that sometimes the strongest statement is silence, that sometimes the most powerful action is withdrawal. When you walk away, let it be with fire in your soul, but no hatred in your heart. Let it be with determination in your step, but no vengeance in your spirit. Let it be with clarity in your mind, but compassion for the person you're leaving behind. Because the man who walks in peace, who chooses his battles wisely, who reserves his energy for what truly matters, who values his own well-being enough to protect it, this man never needs to look back. He's too busy walking forward into the life he's chosen to create, surrounded by people who deserve his presence and relationships that honor his worth. The road ahead is unknown, but it's yours to walk. And sometimes, in the quiet moments when you're far enough away from the chaos to hear your own thoughts clearly again, you'll realize that walking away wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of the chapter where you finally became the author of your own life. This is the wisdom of the ages. Know when to stay and fight, and know when to walk away and thrive. The man who masters this distinction masters his destiny. The man who honors this wisdom honors himself. And the man who has the courage to walk away when walking away serves his highest good. That man walks free.